Hello, I think we're live. Hello,
Yes.
friends. This
I
is
cannot see
Kapil,
you,
and
Kapil. You're in black. I don't know if that's supposed to be the case.
oh, I can see myself. So, hey,
Okay, good.
guys,
Then it's fine.
this is Kapil and Dete. Today, we're going to talk about failures and how we look at failures not as events, but sometimes define our self-worth, our value, and we put our pride online. And so, we're going to have a quick discussion about that. And I also wanted to say that we're going to have these live Facebook lives every week, Saturdays, 11:30 a.m. And we are going to bring some provocative topics, some thought-provoking things. So if you have any topics in mind, please comment. And safe porting that if you are triggered, we will answer any questions. And the idea is to provoke a new way of thinking with these talks. So let's go in there. Hi, Dete.
Hello.
So we're going to talk about failures. And the idea came from this talk I went to at Royal Society of Arts in London, where someone wrote a book about failures and how we are not used to dealing with failures in life. And then Detta was talking about that and how do you want to start with what had you choose that? Let's talk about that and our connection with pride, and let's
Yeah.
start there.
Um, it really interested me because, sorry,
You okay?
but yeah, I'm okay. I'm failing at talking about failure. But anyways, um, so what I'm gonna do is have some water here. I'm gonna have it close. So the thing is, for those who don't know, I have a background in science. I did a PhD in research in computer science. So when Kapil was talking about failure, it reminded me a lot of the experience of creating something novel, and that's an experience of research, and how, especially as a researcher, you have to get used to fail a lot, at least on that area of your life, because researching a topic and creating something that has not been created before, it demands that. So at least that's what's one of the things that I learned from being a researcher, to have a relationship with failure. And when Kapil was describing this talk of the RSA and how this woman wrote a book and how she actually created this relationship, I started thinking how I translated what I learned in science into now my daily existence, which is something I did not do back then. And the important thing is, sometimes when you think you're failing, you actually are not. Especially in science, it happens to all of us when we start doing science. The first part is you get a topic and you start reading a lot about your topic. You do a lot of research. I did that. And then eventually you start having ideas and you identify things that, oh, it would be so cool if this element already existed. And lo and behold, you meet your supervisor and he tells you it already exists. There is a paper from 5 years ago and here it is. And and at that point, usually you feel defeated. You feel like you're worthless, that you couldn't come up with anything novel or original. And what you learn when you talk to other PhD students and your supervisor is that actually your mind started working in the right direction, because you're having ideas that other people have already toyed around, which means that you're actually having a grasp of the subject. But it's very hard without good references and good feedback to have that idea and say, oh, I'm not failing, I'm actually succeeding, I'm getting better at identifying the topic. And this comes from the notion that on the very first go, we have to come up with something new that nobody else has ever tried, and it has to be amazing. And the using that in the research is that once you find somebody who already tried your idea, who already tested, then it's you just, instead of going against that and think you're an idiot, you go on the bandwagon. You take that idea and probably develop or see if there are gaps, and it works in life. If I think, oh, it will be amazing, it happened with this trash challenge. that I kept thinking it would be so cool if people took pictures of before and after. And I was thinking literally this maybe a week or 2 weeks before it started this challenge, because I like going to fields and collect rubbish. And I thought, oh, it looks so nice afterwards once you clear the field. And I had this thought. And then a week or so later, somebody came with a trash challenge and people taking pictures on Instagram with before and after, and it went viral. And instead of being like, oh my God, I'm such a moron, I could have created that trend and everything, I failed. It's like, no, it's amazing. Somebody created, and I just cannot, I just need to take that energy and move forward.
I like that. I think that, so I want to just say that there's a place where we're talking about uniqueness, is that we often go into this place that, oh, we have an idea which is unique, or we're unique and we want to present ourselves that way. And then either it's that there's a shift in consciousness, or we open ourselves up to new possibilities where we suddenly see, oh, it's not actually, we're not that unique, and there's a lot of other people doing the same thing. And then suddenly, but what happens is we end up thinking that there's some kind of like we have to pull back and like we failed at something, as opposed to what I'm learning is that it's, and in business we talk about it all the time, it's like when there are other people doing the same thing, then it's actually a good thing that there's a market that exists for that idea, and that you're not just like insane. Right? So
Exactly.
right, so it's actually a good thing. So looking at that piece, that if you're like, your idea or the thing that you're approaching or doing is not unique, then it's somehow a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's actually it can be a good thing, the way you look at it. Yeah. And I want to bring that sort of more in terms of, so there's a uniqueness side of failure, and then there is actually failure in that what we make it mean about our value, our self-worth, when we are doing something and something, there's an obstruction or we fail, whether it's work related or our relationships. It's like this idea of, for me, I'll just say about me, my thing is, if I fail, suddenly all my belief systems of how I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or how life is happening to me and why it's all hard, and like suddenly it's a great way for me to just like go into that belief system and like start going to self-pity and moping.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, and there's this like there's different schools of thoughts where it's like, oh, it's like, don't go there, don't even like go in there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you block all those things and then move on.
yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit. What are your
Well, my
views on
take
that?
is I'm of the school of don't block anything that comes up. Perhaps the only thing, if you tend to go for long periods of time, try to set a container. If you naturally, I did the part where I had to set containers, and I'm more now able to go deeply into my self pity, think that the world is such an unfair place, and I will never have anything original, da da da. And then after a while, I slowly drift out of it. But it took practice to do that. I'm more of that school that blocking that emotion, especially self pity, and anything that is considered, self obsession, blocking that sometimes doesn't work, and it makes it worse, because it then makes it under the radar but yet equally compulsive. So I prefer not to do that. I prefer to go into the self-pity, into the allow the cry, the tantrum, and physically go, hey, it was such a great idea, and that fucker stole it from me. All these delusions that we have, because nobody really steals anything from anybody. uh, and
Well,
then
you're from Mexico, I'm from India. We both like a bit of drama as well, right?
exactly, so allow the drama. I don't have a problem with drama, because
I think
believe me,
life would be really bland if there was no drama. If it was
yeah,
just like,
you know
if it was just like, oh, I failed, I did something wrong, no drama, just keep moving on. It'll just be like black
yeah,
and white and monotonous. What's the fun in
exactly.
that?
If that was the case, we'll be robots, or we'll be digital, like 0101. going around, and that's not the point. So it's allow that drama and have a friend that you can say, can I just moan to you about how stupid I am for like 5 minutes, and then we laugh about it, because believe me, like the ideas that come up in those morning spaces are brilliant about how I'm at the center of the universe and the universe conspires against me because every step I go is terrible. I shouldn't be alive and all these thoughts. And 10 minutes later I'm like, why am I thinking those things? So anyways, it's better, it's
That's
healthy.
right. And I think that's the interesting point, because what I'm learning is that the amount of time I spend in that self-pity and moaning, there's almost like those two things can happen in parallel. Like
Hmm.
in my mind, I can do the work to say, oh, failure is an event. Something happened. It didn't work out the way I thought it would work out. And it doesn't actually mean anything about my self-worth. And
Hmm.
just keep doing the right next thing. So there's that layer of like logical, creating a formula. And then there is this like, I still want a little bit time to go into self-pity and moaning and like, oh, it just feels so bad.
But because at that
And I
point,
think a
when you're
bit,
in self pity, it feels really good. It feels resonant with what you're thinking and you're feeling,
yeah.
and it's allowing that resonance to come up, and because when we suppress it, it's often because we know the better person wouldn't feel self pity. We're not that better person at that point, so.
Right. And I want to bring this into more into relationships,
Mm-hmm.
like our because relationships I find are the trickiest,
Mm.
even more tricky than our purpose or work, because I think with work there's still some externalization with our relationships because it's like so close and it's like a mirror to us. I find that really hard when you're like, especially if you get into some kind of like fight, like I have with Luca, where if we get into some kind of like intense spot where
Mm-hmm.
it just it's like the automatic reactions just kick in, and
Mm-hmm.
before long we're just like going down like the downward spiral of like just going for a fight. um and when I look at that, sometimes it's just like, oh, why does it's easy to go into like, oh, it keeps happening all the time and feeling like a failure in that way,
Yeah.
as opposed to just like, oh, it happened and can we like move on. So how do you deal with that in failures? Oh, sorry, in relationships.
Well, I was thinking that it's really difficult in relationship because it's so badly seen that you change the your relationship. So any change in how your relationship looks to others is deemed as failure. So divorcing, for example, that is an extreme example of that, is seen as a failure, like you failed in your marriage rather than you arrange your dynamic in your relationship with that human being. It's for me, it's like even just the thought of that is it brings a lot of fear. And I don't
I'll
know
just
because
say
I'm.
that I
Mm-hmm.
certainly, when my first marriage ended,
Mm-hmm.
one of the big things that I had to go through for a long, long time was that I failed at it. I failed at
Mm.
something that I thought will last a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do a good job. And not just like I failed at it, but I let everyone else down around me,
Mm-hmm.
especially my family, especially my family, because my parents were together until my dad passed away. And, it was, in my eyes, it was a successful relationship. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like the blueprint of what successful relationships look like. So that was a hard pill to swallow for quite a long time. Um, and yeah, and it's people say that you can look at it as a success for that period. And I think in those kind of scenarios, you just have to go through a period of sort of letting go and mourning and
Yeah.
everything else. And I wonder if there is some relief in thinking that you're not a bad person.
There is that, and I think because I observe everything in terms of creation and changing relationships to something. What happens when a relationship changes, and it could be, for example, in this case, divorcing, but if a partner dies, it's actually the same thing.
Mm,
Your identity dies. Your identity with regards to that person, being married to somebody dies. So there is a natural element of grief because you grieve who you were in that relationship, who dies because you're divorcing or because the other person died. So there is an element of ego death there that's why it's so painful and that's why it's so difficult. And it does not necessarily mean failure. It may look like that, especially in a divorcing, because we don't have the rituals or the structures. By the way, Grayson Perry created a divorcing ritual that is amazing. Is a documentary on Channel 4. But
mm,
he's the person who made me realize it doesn't have to be the usual, drama story that we never speak to each other, we're always fighting, or we use our children as weapons to like get back at each other. It doesn't have to be like that. We just don't have the context. So the period of grieving is that period of like you're trying to find a new context to relate to this human being, and it happens with any person and with any creation because a lot of what I talk about is about creation. So you created this relationship, this connection with this human being, and now it's demanding to change, and it's tough because it basically your brain is saying no compute, I don't understand what's happening, especially if there are no
yeah.
contexts. But it's a lot easier when a person died in the respect that there are contexts. So the person died, there is a process of duel, of grief. But when your relationship dies, uh, what are the contexts? Tell me if there is actually any common ritual where you said we're going to consciously dissolve our marriage. And
Mm,
my only example is this one of Grace and Perry, where they all invite their friends and they declare, they give gratitudes to each other, they express how much they love, how much they wish they. I was like, this is so good. Because then they change and they talk like human beings, and they have a party afterwards. And it's like, it's so groundbreaking that I saw the comments regarding this episode and people hated it. It's, my husband was a dick, blah blah blah. And I said, yeah, because there is no content. But it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to
yeah.
be that doom of failure and thinking that you fail your family because you do it differently. Basically, you're creating something new and in that point.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I'll be interested in seeing that thing. My personal experience is that, especially when you're ending something that long term,
Mm,
there's a whole process
mm.
because it's a process of like unraveling a lot of things about yourself. And for me, it took about 3 to 4 years
Yeah.
after being together for 11 years, with someone. It took a long time to like start taking one thing at a time. Is like, oh, I was an asshole there, or this was my fault, where I blame that other person all the time. So it's like it continued as I learned about myself. More and more things came out. But I think I want to come back to this idea of failure and how
Mm-hmm.
like all of those things were needed, and
Mm-hmm.
at the
Mm-hmm.
same time it's the looking at as something that is happening, or an event that happened, and yes, like it brings out all these emotions, but I think it's the place where we attach that to our self-worth and our
Mm-hmm.
pride and our value, that of like somehow we're not good enough, or somehow we're not whole, or we're bad people. And I think that's where uh, sort of it becomes, I don't know, I don't want to call it negative, but it becomes like more of a weight, as opposed to us having emotional experiences, and yet we can keep moving forward. So for me, a lot of it was about, even if I found out about some patterns
Mm-hmm.
that I had, saying, oh, I had this pattern, now I know about it and I can do something about it, and then going back to clean things up with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, and I'm talking about my own experience, it started from a very early age. The
Mm,
sense of success was very attached to my self-worth because I was a very clever child. So
mm,
going to school, I was those kind of really annoying children that never had to study and just passed the exams because like, it's so obvious. I got it the first time. Why do I need to study? But I was praised for that, and I was very much encouraged to show off uh, and and to believe that all the love and attention I was getting, it was because I was worthy, because I was better than others at academic feats. Uh, but the problem with that is that when I wasn't that good, immediately my self worth was impacted, and then I developed a terrible fear of failure. And it
mm,
paralyzes you because you keep doing the thing that you're not really that good at, but at least you know you can't get away with it. But you're afraid to try anything new because your self worth is so attached, so solidified to that element of being good that you can't really see any other way. I was actually talking to somebody recently about it, how for a long time, I did things that I did not like, but I was so scared to try anything new because trying anything new involves a big element of failing for a while. And for a long time, I never failed. And
right,
so the few times I failed, it's like, oh my God, this is terrifying. And nobody told me how to relate to failure in a
right.
healthy way that did not involve my self worth. I had over 20 years of being told that I was loved and cared, or at least that's what I heard. It's not necessarily what I was told. Um, I was loved and cared and appreciated because I was smart.
Mm,
And then if I'm not fitting that smart model that I think I should, then it's really really scary. It's a very scary position that I found myself in.
mm. Yeah, yeah, I like that. I really like that. I think it's I yeah. You know.
You went there like, oh yes, I
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I so if one thing about failure and how to deal with it, or how to build a relationship with failure, what would that be?
um, for me at least, I'm more interested in creating stuff, and whether I find that somebody already did or not, it's irrelevant in at least in this specific point. When you create something new, a new method, a new event, and even a new way to do coaching, the thing is, I know I'm going to fail. There will be a lot of things that are going to be wrong because this is something new, something I never tried before. So I had slowly trained my mind to, instead of focusing on the things I've done wrong, is to focusing on the things I did right, and see
Mm,
why I did right. And it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of practice, and fear inventory to focus, especially, you launch something and nobody replies, and you're like, and then go, what did I do well? Oh, actually the copy was amazing, like I wrote really well, but I failed to reach the right audience, but the copy was good. So this is the part where you're like, okay, that it means I don't have to worry about that part. My attention is sufficiently good enough there, so I can put attention on maybe finding the right way to reach the people I want to reach. But it's focusing on what's right, especially if you have a perfectionist mind like mine. Don't focus on what's wrong, and learn, and more like, it's not a command, it's learn not to focus, and learn tools like debriefing with a friend, having good reflection, having a coach who asks you the question, because you're not going to ask your questions like, oh, I did terrible, or tell me everything I did wrong. Have a person who said, what did you do right,
mm.
and reminds you constantly. So that would be my thing.
I like that. Thank you. So focus on, of all the things, what you did right as opposed to
Yes.
the things that are not working. Good. For me, I love that, and I've noticed that definitely in myself as well. The thing I would add to that um, is look at where you're looking at failure as something that is continuously happening to
Mm,
you versus an event that happened. Um,
Mm-hmm.
accept all the emotions and bring your attention or presence to this fact that it's an event that happened
Mm-hmm.
and that you can still keep going and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's a good peak for us to stop. You want to say if people want to connect with you, how
Yes.
they can do that?
Personal message to Facebook is probably the best way. Also, the comments in this live stream. More than happy to answer any question there, or by personal message. And especially if you want to work with me, send me a personal message. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sate. And for me, if you would like to connect with me, again, send me a message, write a comment here underneath. I have a Facebook page called Kapil Gupta Coaching, and I also run a closed Facebook men's group. It's called Integrated Man. So if you're a man interested in joining their group, again, you can comment below or message me, and I'll connect you there. We will be doing these Facebook Lives every week now, hopefully for next few weeks at least. And if you have any questions or any comments about this, we would love to hear from you. Put them in the comments underneath this live stream, or send us messages. Or if you have any topics that you would like to hear about
Yeah.
us talk, that would be great as well. Other than that, that's it. Thank you very much, and have a great Easter weekend. And
You
let's
too.
stay connected.
Take care. Bye
All
bye.
right, bye.